Welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Black. I am CEO of the Conference Board of Canada, and I'm delighted to be here with all of you today. As I am coming to you from Toronto, I would like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Métis, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. And given that this event is being held virtually with attendees from across the country, I would also like to take the opportunity to recognize and acknowledge all of the nations across Turtle Island. Now, after a long and dark year, I think many of us are starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And the theme of PwC's CEO survey, From Optimism to Opportunity, perfectly captures this sentiment. This is the 24th annual CEO survey, which takes a pulse check on more than 5,000 CEOs globally to hear their views. If you haven't had a chance yet, we encourage you to take some time this week and read the report. We've linked to it in the resources box on this platform. Over the next hour, we're going to touch on key themes and insights from the report, and we're going to get into topics such as digital transformation, climate change, and of course, the future of work. Just last week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Nicolas Marcoux, the CEO of PwC Canada, for a fireside chat about their findings. Take a look. Welcome, Nicolas. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Susan. Happy to be here.
Let's jump right in. The title of this year's report is From Optimism to Opportunity. Given the year we've had, I have to ask why. Can you shed some light on this optimism?
Well, we actually have to take a little bit of a step back. So pessimism was at an all-time high the past 2-3 years. And now we're seeing quite a sentiment of rebound. And I really like the Global CEO Survey. It's actually the most exciting time of year for me because I find it is the best leading indicator on the planet. You're getting the pulse of 5,000 CEOs globally. And we have done this survey for over 24 years. And there's a direct correlation between what CEOs say and what happens. So take it on the pessimistic side. So if 5,000 CEOs are pessimistic about the future, you can bet that they are not going to be investing massively in their businesses, and therefore they're not stimulating the economy. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. To the contrary, like this year, when CEOs are positive about economic growth, they're looking to invest, to capture opportunities, and therefore we should see a direct correlation with an uplift and a rebound in the economy. So one thing that we're looking at when we look at that's the global cut, but on the Canadian cut, we also see that 72% of Canadian CEOs believe that the global economy will grow in the next 12 months. And Canadian CEOs are also quite bullish about their own organizations and their opportunities for growth, which bodes well for Canada, which is great. And I would say most leaders also expect their revenues and profitability to increase. And they're seeing opportunities both on the M&A side as well as organic growth.
Well, that's certainly very good news, especially after a few years of pessimism. So what Canadian CEOs need to do then to harness this optimism and to drive sustainable growth in 2021?
So I would say 2 words, Susan: business transformation. All the CEOs I'm talking to are talking about transforming their business. And they need to continue to transform their business, especially towards being more digital. We are at PwC on our own digital journey, which started well before the pandemic, and it has served us quite well during the pandemic. Another area with the focus for Canadian CEOs is cybersecurity. They need to invest more. Cyber has moved up to the #1 threat or concern for Canadian CEOs during the pandemic. And when you think about it, the risk profile is quite different. With everybody working from home instead of from the office, the risk profile is different, and now we are on the home field of the hackers. They're used to working from remote. The third action, I would say, would be around climate change. So that's one area where we see a slight difference between Canadian CEOs and their global counterparts. Canadian CEOs appear to be less concerned about climate change, which is somewhat of a surprise to us. And I would say even globally, very few CEOs have a specific strategy to address climate change and what they're going to do about vis-a-vis their business. CEOs also need to invest in talent. There's a war for talent out there. We see it at PwC, and it'll be a constant battle in the next 12 months, the war for talent. And I think, again, CEOs are looking to M&A as an opportunity for growth. There's plenty of capital out there, whether it's private equity, whether it's corporates that are flush with cash. And the banks, they are absolutely willing to lend money and deploy capital for strategic acquisitions. So at PwC, we strongly believe that this will be a deals-led recovery.
A deals-led recovery. How interesting. So, Nicola, you're a CEO. You're speaking to a virtual room of business leaders. Let me ask you, how optimistic are you? And share with us what you're going to be focusing on in the next 12 months as we enter the post-recovery era. What is PwC going to be focusing on?
Well, one thing that has impressed me the most in the past 14 months is how Canadian CEOs have been collaborating with each other. I've been very fortunate to talk to over 100 CEOs across the country, and everybody's kind of looking to share best practices. What are you doing vis-a-vis mental health? What are you doing vis-a-vis your employees? What are you doing vis-a-vis return to office? Maybe that's our Canadian nature of being collaborative, but I think I've seen a tremendous amount of sharing in the past 12 months because none of us have managed through a global pandemic before. So there's been lots of help out there. As far as PwC, well, I'm a glass half full type of person, so I'm very bullish about the prospects at PwC in the next 12 months. And I think where we have the most credibility vis-a-vis our clients is when we've done it to ourselves first. So then we are able to walk the talk. And I'll take ESG as an example. We have come out with a clear statement that we want to be net zero by 2030. And we want to help our clients on their journey, whether it's 2030, 2040, depending on the industry and the business. And then lastly, I would say a big focus for us in the next 12 months will be the mental health of our employees. This pandemic has taken its toll on our people, 14 months of working from remote, and in some instances, in some pretty small with their apartments or condos downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver. And, I'm looking forward to seeing people in person very, very soon.
Well, I think you have a lot of company in wanting to come back and be in person. Many of us are feeling that. Mental health has been a really big issue. I think it's been a big issue for a long time. So can we dig down into that focus on mental health and well-being? Tell me, for you at PwC, what does a successful approach look like now and post-pandemic?
Well, the well-being of our employees is critical to us because one of our values is the value of care. Care for our clients, care for our people, care for each other as partners. And, mental health is a big issue in Canada. I think every week over 500,000 Canadians don't show up for work because of mental health. And that has a huge economic burden on the country and the economy. So at PwC, we were on a journey on mental health to support our people more prior to the pandemic. And we've seen, the toll that the pandemic has had on them. So what we've done is we've tried to get ahead of it by providing additional time off with business closures. We've also had ongoing check-ins on the well-being of our people and our partners across the country. We've done regular pulse surveys with our people. We're doing virtual coffee connections. And we're also educating our people. When the pandemic started, we had a physician come in and explain what is COVID-19, how do you get the virus, how do you keep yourself safe. We've brought in psychiatrists who could help us identify what are the early signs that you're not feeling well or that a colleague might not be feeling well and what we need to do. Again, trying to get ahead of it, trying to be more in solutions mode than being in reaction mode. And I think the pandemic has been probably hardest on our marginalized communities. And, the impact has just been even greater on them. So post-COVID, we need to, put our arms around our people across the country and focus on their well-being and really try to stay connected with them because I think it's going to be critical as we move to our new normal.
Well, let me ask you another question. Our new normal. Many organizations have been out of the workplace for the last 15 months or struggling to figure out what a hybrid model looks like. What are your plans for, I'll say, returning to work? What does post-COVID look like for PwC?
Well, post-COVID will definitely be around collaboration, sharing, celebrating. So the office will be different. We're not going back to what it looked like in January 2020. I think the number that I'm hearing the most is the number 3. So 3 days a week. And that might be Tuesday through Thursday. It might be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I think employers will need to provide greater flexibility to their employees because people have realized that they can work from remote and be quite efficient. And there are some benefits from working from remote, but there are also a lot of benefits of working together in the same space. So we're going to have to find the right balance. And that's what we're going to try to do at PwC. And the office will become, again, a place where we celebrate success, share knowledge, co-create, and transfer knowledge from one generation to another, like we've been doing for over 100 years at PwC Canada.
Nicola, thank you for sharing what PwC is doing. Thank you for sharing the results of the survey. It really is very encouraging as we look to 2021 and 2022 and hopefully a brighter future for everyone. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to see everybody in person soon.
Me too.
Now, I'd like to welcome our panelists for this afternoon's discussion. Irene Barungi, Chief Information Security Officer at Interact, Michael Ward, CEO and Chief Sustainability Officer at IKEA Canada, and of course, Nicola Marcoux, CEO of PwC Canada, will join us again. If you have questions, we will of course have time to answer them at the end of our discussion. You can send your questions through the box marked Q&A on your screen. So let's dive right in. Canadian CEOs are anticipating immense growth in the coming year. And as we heard from Nicola, to be successful in those growth plans, we need to make strategic investments. One could argue there's nothing better to invest in than our people. So Michael, what do you think? How are you investing in your people at IKEA?
Susan, thanks for the question. And maybe just to set the stage and build a little context, because before the pandemic, we were already into a massive transformation of our business. And I think a lot of people would probably recognize that. So our attitude was already bold, and we said we would change everything. Actually, for us, it accelerated a lot of the changes that we were working on. So back to change everything almost, what does that mean? You know, we were looking at everything and continue to do so, but what we're not changing and what we continue to develop every year, and now with the latest lessons learned, was our culture and values. And let me start there then. When we talk about investment in people, this is where we begin. You know, our culture and values, they guide us, they bind us together, they give us confidence in crisis and in times of change, and they really were a compass for us to navigate during the pandemic. And I think coming out of the pandemic, we expect in a different way as much volatility as almost is coming in, and we count on them to help us through the next stages as well. So some of the key values that really came to the fore, just to give people an idea, togetherness was super important during the past year and a half, caring for people and for planet, you know, simplicity, being direct, sharing information, renewing and improving, and leading by example. So we continue to breathe life into all of these values and develop the culture that we need. And I'm a big believer that, you know, when you talk a lot about culture and values, it's in the walls. People feel it. They know if it's there and if it's real or if it isn't. So we really work hard and we'll continue to work hard at making sure it's in the walls. You know, our business is changing as well, rapidly. We're supporting people with a lot of upskilling, reskilling, and learning how to, you know, work with our new growth. People are really eager to take part in all of that. They want to be a part of the future. So we're investing a lot in that too. Of growing concern for me is the mental health and wellness of all of our people. You know, earlier in the pandemic, that meant really leading with strict health and safety, number one. I mean, we're in a business where our units have stayed open when we're able to. So we have people interacting with the public and interacting with each other. a lot of support and communication and information, a lot of it. Everything with all the changes going on. And then really making sure that psychological safety was number one in the way that we were supporting people. And lately, we're going to continue to focus heavily on health and wellness as we move forward. One thing we've done recently, over 300 of our leaders, we've invested in mental health first aid. This is an amazing course that we participated in, and it really helps everyone understand what to look for, how to speak to one another, how to make it so that we can support each other. And we've also launched a global campaign called Are You Okay?, which will continue to support us to stay together as we're apart and to navigate through the next steps. You know, we do a coworker survey once a year. We just completed the latest one, and it confirms that our people are confident in the future. They're confident in the future of IKEA. However, at the same time, they're really asking for more support in making sure mental health and wellness is a top priority.
Thank you, Michael. Those are very inspiring words. As we heard from Nicola, mental health, a big issue for everybody. Culture and values, yes, critical. Nicola or Irene, would you like to add anything to that?
Maybe I'll go first and let Irene complete. On what Michael said about culture and values, so important. We at PwC, we really led with our culture and values. It was our guiding light throughout every decision we've made during the pandemic. And our people are tired, similar to what Michael described, and we've decided to introduce long summer weekends so our people can rest and recharge. It's not just about compensation, but it's also about giving people a chance to recharge the batteries after what has been a truly challenging time for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on this. At Interact, what we did is that, we made the necessary adjustments to our policies, our HR policies, to be able to accommodate a remote working environment. Our tech teams worked tirelessly to ensure that employees had the necessary tools and launching, collaboration sites, ensuring that we can connect securely through some of these collaboration utilities. We also had the same type of allowance that you mentioned, Nicola, which is that, we provided employees with sort of a bursary to be able to be comfortable at home, because we didn't know how long this was going to last for. And so what better way than to ensure that people are at least comfortable and upgraded their home environments to be able to be sitting at a desk for long hours at a time. And then we just kept people engaged. We've got a really healthy social committee. So we ensure that, employees are engaged. We, have a really flourishing diversity and inclusion team that, is really, on top of things to ensure that we're incorporating everybody's concerns. There's been a lot of social activities as well that are happening worldwide. So it was really just to ensure that we are really engaging staff and employees and trying to create the same environment as they were in the office.
Thank you, Irene. And clearly these things have always been important, but I think the pandemic and the challenges of the last year have really highlighted them and put them front and center. I'm going to pick up on something that came out in the survey and that Michael commented on, and that is that the pandemic has clearly forced businesses online, and many for the first time. So we have employers, as we just spoke about, working from home. We have goods and services moving to digital platforms. And we know that's forced organizations to accelerate digital transformation in an unprecedented way. So Michael, could you expand a little bit on the expectations of your customers and your employees? What's changed specifically in terms of how you've had to make digital investments? What impact, in other words, has it had on those investments?
Yeah, I mean, our digital transformation is an extremely important part of that transformation I talked about a few minutes ago. I mean, customers and coworkers change super quick. The adjustments they made starting a year ago happened overnight. And we know the majority of our new growth, at least, is really from our online business as part of this omni-channel strategy that we're in the middle of. So in order to prepare for this, we're investing heavily in digital transformation in several areas. And the first is in a lot of our foundation systems. the ones that support our new operating models, and for example, the way we fulfill, we have so many more flows than we used to. Our systems need to be able to make best use out of all of that in order for the customer to get the best experience. So we're investing heavily in there. We're also investing heavily in self-service tools from a customer experience perspective. People love that. If you can go into an app and take care of a lot of things yourselves, as long as it's easy and it's seamless. So we're integrating those into our website, into our app. And then the third way is really that we're developing now is, in the whole shopping experience, from planning and design and all of that. We're coming out with way more tools in the virtual world and in our stores in the future that will help people with that part of the shopping experience as well.
That's a lot of investment, a lot of change. Irene, I want to ask you a question. Interac would have been at the forefront of this digital acceleration with many of its clients. What has this meant for cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I'm going to just touch upon a few things before I jump into cyber. I just want to touch upon just on the goods and services point, and then pivot that into the employee working from home. So when the pandemic hit, it really impacted our ability to be in the office, like much of the world. And so our priority was to ensure that our platforms, our products, and our services continue to run smoothly for Canadians during these uncertain times. We didn't know how long it was going to go for. Millions of Canadians rely on Interac as both a network and a service provider to move money. And so our focus was to ensure that we maintain the reliability, the stability, and the security of our networks, as well as expanding some of the availability of our services so that it can reach more Canadians. And just, I'm setting that up to say that, in the conventional ways of transacting, most of us have a debit card that's issued by a bank. And so once the lockdown happened, sort of post the declaration of the pandemic, it meant that people were moving less and people were moving around less, transacting less. And so a lot of the ways in which we were seeing, increases in transactions, whether it's a point of sale machine in a merchant store or, withdrawing cash from an ABM, started to move to online, which is our e-transfer service. And so it was already, a fairly successful service, but it was accelerated during this pandemic just because Canadians, families, your friends, needed to move money. And so we were quick to respond to that. And so we were able to ensure that whatever ways that Canadians needed to get funds across, it was available. On the point about sort of moving to the working home environment, this pandemic has really been the catalyst for a lot of enterprises leapfrogging to cloud-based services. It's more convenient. It's less onerous on on-prem technology. And so we, as Interac as well, we are big adopters of cloud technologies. And so this is what allowed us to facilitate and also mobilize our employees to be able to work from home fairly quickly. But there's one point that, I have to really harp on, and that is, and it's kind of going into the security of things, a sort of a fairly mature organization that has good practices around business continuity and crisis management, and would have had rehearsed plans, and also would have sort of had, their finger on the pulse with what's going on in the world. I think we're able to mobilize their staff fairly quickly. That's what we did at Interac. We have rehearsed plans for our business continuity, where we ensure that our tech staff, who are critical to the function of our services and our platforms, had tested processes. We tested the technology connections. And so all of that had already been rehearsed. And so when we mobilized and became online, it was fairly seamless. On the digital transformation bit, I can't emphasize more on this, and I think Michael's also brought this up, in that transforming digitally is critical to the survival of any business. I look at my coffee shop across the street. For the longest time, they're small, they're brick and mortar, fairly urban in nature, not much going on except getting really, really good coffee, and they only transacted with cash. And that was just the way they did it. But after and during this pandemic, they needed to survive. And so they quickly adopted to these really chic and sleek point of sale machines. And so that was kind of their version of a digital transformation, but it's happening on so many levels. So I really think that it is an important venture for organizations, and we're going to see, more and more of this as organizations scale. And then the last point, just about digital transformation, and when I think it's important for organizations to understand, it's a really great opportunity for you to re-architect your organizations, how they provide the services, so that you start to bake in good architectural principles, and more importantly, you start to bake good security design principles, so that you start to build a more robust environment.
And on maybe on the point of robust environment, and your point, Irene, on business continuity and having plans, so important, because we at PwC, we monitor cyber attack activity in North America, and it is up 20-fold compared to the beginning of the pandemic. So it's just like mind-boggling. And it's not just greater volume. The hackers are also a lot more sophisticated in the way they attack companies. So important for us to have business continuity plans and to go through those dry runs as far as what to do if a situation happens. Couldn't agree more.
You got it. That's right. And that it's rehearsed at least twice a year, right? Yeah.
Well, that's good practical advice, but let's pick up on that one, because it is shocking the amount of ransomware we've seen and the spike in cyber attacks, clearly on the rise. Yet we still see some CEOs not prioritizing increased investments in their cybersecurity. So I have to ask the question, Irene, are these CEOs missing the mark?
Absolutely. I mean, if it's not about paying attention to cybersecurity because you don't live and breathe it, and you aren't paying attention to mainstream media, then you've missed the mark. The cyber landscape has been under extreme pressure and uncertainty, and that's been a growing trend, but it's been exacerbated by the pandemic. Cybersecurity threats have become more sophisticated in nature. I'd say over the last 6 months, we've seen some quite prominent cyber incidents that have occurred. In December, we had the widely published and very sophisticated, and probably one of the biggest in history, of a supplier chain attack on the SolarWinds Orion product. And that affected, about 18,000 customers, because, you rely on software, and when you need an update, you download the update. And unfortunately, it was laced with bad code. Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities that was posted earlier this year, the Colonial pipeline that happened in May timeframe, which effectively, saw a shortage of fuel on the Eastern Seaboard, and then, it created panic and a frenzy of hoarding. And of course, we've got other cases such as, credential stuffing for Canada Revenue Agency, Canada Post experience some incidents. So, I could list the name, they named them all if we had a lot of time, but they're growing, and they're growing every single day. And so again, if you're not paying attention at least to mainstream media, then you definitely have missed the mark. We surveyed Canadians last year during our cybersecurity month, which runs in October, and 84% of Canadians agreed that cybersecurity is it's important more now than ever. But only about 44% of them felt that they were well protected. We've seen an increase in COVID scams and fraud, and especially now during this vaccine period, lots of scams around fake vaccines, offering health kits, and of course, the one that I just don't understand, how do you sleep with yourself every night, is identity theft. To steal identities so that you can get the CERB payments or the Ontario Child Benefit. So it's been an upswing.
We're in violent agreement on this call that cybersecurity is a huge risk, and I think Nicola mentioned that it was the #1 risk. So if there's a CEO sitting on this call who all of a sudden has heard the truth here very quickly, what would you tell that CEO to do? What do you do about cybersecurity if, it was really, number 10 on your risk list, and you're hearing in this session, it should have been #1. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I'd say, you've got to make the investment in your tips, your techniques, and your processes so that you build the right types of controls to be able to identify. You need a mechanism to be able to detect. And through that detection, it could inform your prevention mechanisms. And more importantly, you've really got to build a resiliency plan that is around our response capabilities, which is being able to do incident response and recovery, because your business depends on your continuity of your business. So I'd say definitely make the investments in those areas. The other one is around security awareness, training on the employees. We've seen, like, as you mentioned about the ransomware, but phishing still is, top of mind, and probably the number one way in which a lot of these ransomware campaigns use to spread ransomware. So I'd say invest in your security awareness, invest in your technical controls, invest in your resiliency plans, and really take it seriously.
Right. It's almost like every employee should have taken a course on phishing in the last year. I know I hit that button almost every day, I think, in my Outlook.
Okay. Right. And not just a course, not just one point in time. It has to be a recurring thing. And you've got to get creative about how it just becomes part of your cyber hygiene. Just like you brush your teeth every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Cyber hygiene.
You mentioned our CEOs missing the mark, Susan, and very few Canadian CEOs became CEOs because they were cyber experts, present company included. So, but it's so important that to have people around you that know this. And if you don't think it's your responsibility, just talk to one of the Canadian CEOs that has been victim of a cyber attack and how they felt when they had to disclose it to their board of directors. They probably felt that they were, it was pretty much their responsibility ultimately. And so important to talk to experts so that you can ask probing questions to your team around you, or to make sure that you are doing the right things. You don't need to be an expert as a CEO, but you certainly need to be able to ask probing questions. And if you don't feel that you're getting the answers that are satisfactory, probably your board would think that those answers are not satisfactory as well.
Well, good practical advice. Let's shift gears to sustainability. So the environment is of increasing concern to everyone, to consumers, to employees, to investors. More than ever before, we see people who are expecting that organizations, companies will have climate action plans in their strategies, in their businesses. Those are the organizations they want to do business with. So Michael, IKEA has some bold sustainability ambitions. You have the title Chief Sustainability Officer. Tell us about IKEA's journey to get there, and tell us why it's a corporate priority for you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Maybe you can start with why we need to take action. And we've all been dealing with this once in a generation crisis caused by the COVID virus, but I think behind it, and the larger crisis that we're all faced with that hasn't got away, is the rapid warming of the planet, and the climate change which results. And so we, as you say, really take this seriously. We've been working with this for years, and we shifted gears a few years ago. One of the first things we've done is we've actually mapped our whole value chain. And we understand now that at least our direct and indirect impact, just what IKEA does, is about 0.04% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a big responsibility. And we have an opportunity to act. And, given that knowledge, the next decade is critical. So therefore, we've also stated what we are committed to. And by 2030, we have the ambition to become climate positive. And that means that we will remove more greenhouse gas emissions than the whole value chain emits while growing our business. And we've already proven to ourselves that this is possible. The last few years, as our business has grown, our climate footprint has got a little bit smaller. And as I said, we've measured the entire value chain, because to get a grip on this, you need to do some deep work. So for example, we know that 60% of our emissions come from our supply chain, that part of our total value chain. We know 12% come from meeting the customer, our retail operations and so on, and about 24% come from when our customers are using the products that we sell them. And we've set clear goals in each one of those steps. So we've broken that down and set clear goals. For example, we'll reduce scope 1 and 2 emissions by 80% versus 2016. So scope 1 is all of the things directly from our business. Scope 2 is based on the energy that we consume. We'll also really focus on travel, consumer travel, our coworker travel, and home delivery. So we'll reduce those emissions by 50% by 2030, and. Those are just two examples of the kind of things we're focusing on. And in the retail part of our business, we have lots going on. We already generate more renewable energy in Canada than we actually consume in our operations. We have wind farms in Alberta. We have solar arrays on all of our buildings, et cetera. We want to start selling solar energy to our customers, and we're working on that. We recently announced that we're going to start deliveries with electric vehicles in cooperation with 2 Canadian companies, and that will help us get to our goal of 100% EV home deliveries by 2025. And we have an amazing opportunity because we work with millions of Canadians and interact with millions of Canadians every day in their homes. So we have this fantastic opportunity to help them with sustainable solutions and sustainable products. And we're working on increased plant-based options in our food offer, et cetera, et cetera. The list is very long, Susan, but it's super exciting to work on this. And so we really take seriously our impact and our ability to actually help all of us live within the limits of one planet, because that's really the challenge that all of us have in front of us.
Well, that is an impressive list of actions and aspirations, and I'm sure it gives your employees and your customers a sense of purpose on what IKEA is all about. Nicola, we heard from you in the video about PwC's goals around sustainability. Is there anything you would like to add, or Irene, anything you'd like to share from Interact's point of view?
So maybe quickly, first of all, I'd like to commend Michael for everything that IKEA is doing. It's true leadership, and thank you for what you're doing. It's very inspiring. I think it also builds trust. And society needs more trust. Like, there's been this massive erosion of trust in governments, big corporations, big institutions, big four firms, and I think the ESG agenda aligns very nicely to increasing trust in society, which we desperately need. I think that it is topical. Like, every single conversation I have with CEOs across the country, ESG is part of the conversation somewhere, somehow. I was personally very disappointed in the CEO survey results on the Canadian cut, where it would appear that Canadian CEOs don't actually see climate change as changing the way they do business. And I think the day is not very far away where we will be in front of our employees at town halls, and not only will our employees ask us what we're doing as an organization or as a company, but also as CEOs, what are you doing? Do you drive a F-150, which I do, and I need to probably change to electric very, very soon. And I think it's we do a lot of good things. Like, my daughter got us to get the plastic bottles out of the house 2 years ago. Good thing to do, but I think we also have to lead by example as CEOs, because I think our people will look to us for that leadership. So I commend Michael.
Can I just build? Sorry, Irene, if you had something just to build on what you said, Nicola, because it's absolutely true. And it's interesting how fast that's changing as well. I'm Canadian. I have lived abroad, though, for the last 20 years. And when I came back 2 years ago, I was a bit surprised that the awareness wasn't as high as some of the other countries that I lived in, including the US, which is the last country that I was in. But I have to say, the last couple of years, that's changing quickly. One of the indications we have is we have lots of products that we actually promote and identify as more sustainable. And there's a lot of reasons behind each one. It might be in their manufacture, it might be in their use. And we measure the sales of those. They are actually some of our best-selling products. So I think that what used to be a few years ago, that the awareness was there, but people maybe weren't willing to make any changes, or they certainly didn't want to spend extra money on it. It's shifting now, and people are responding to good offers. People are responding to when you put it out there, and people are, I agree with you, Nicola, we will be pressed more and more and more that if you don't have something that makes sense to me in that vein, then probably I'll go elsewhere.
Very true. Irene, anything, last 2 cents on this topic?
Yeah, what Michael and Nicola have said is spot on. Nicola, I think your car sounded really fast, and I'm curious what it is because I don't know much about some of these cars, so pretty impressive. But I will say on the Interact side, we are at the start of our journey on this. Being a fintech means that we're actually a technology company, and so with technology, we have quite a large asset base of computer systems, right? And so they generate heat and they consume power. And so we're, also looking to start our journey on how we get better about more energy efficient uses of technologies. Maybe we don't need so many, physical servers to kind of go into hardware. So anyways, but we are in the beginning of our journey on this, sure.
Well, it is a journey for everybody. So we're coming almost to the 2:45 mark. So I'm going to end this part of the discussion with a rapid fire question. And Nicola, I believe it's the same one I asked you in the Fireside chat, so you may want to repeat it, you may want to add something to it. But for each of you, I'm curious, what are you personally optimistic about? Michael, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Susan. Maybe I can start where I left off. And I really feel the change when it comes to everyone's awareness and determination to do something about sustainability and, really walking the talk with how they're living every day. And I see more and more people coming online all the time. We've been working on this for years, and all of a sudden, many, many more people than even a few years ago want to talk about it. The curiosity is there, and I really start to see real solutions coming in that will make a difference. So I think that we've reached the tipping point, and I would just encourage everyone to make this a central part of what they're doing for the next few years. We all want to hand something off to our children that they can live on in a good way. So we're in this together.
Right, and it's a bigger purpose, it's a bigger issue than any of us or any of our individual companies. So, well put. Irene, what are you optimistic about?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be optimistic about the future. Otherwise, we wouldn't continue this good fight, especially being in cyber. But more on the human side, we're resilient. We'll bounce back. It's been a bit tragic on some communities, whether it means that employment has been lost or loved ones have been affected by this. But we'll bounce back. And my hope is that we will have better plans and have a better approach about how to deal with some of these problems because we'll have better information. And if I sort of pivot to the information security world of things, it's that we'll just continue to do the hard work to deal with the big problems. But good progress has been made, and so I'm extremely optimistic and really looking forward to the future.
Thank you. And Nicola, your thoughts?
I would say, Susan, I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rethink the way we work and deliver for our clients. And the other thing I'm very, very optimistic about is the Montreal Canadiens going very, very deep into the playoffs. And I think as Canadians, we all need to rally behind something other than the percentages of vaccinations across the country.
You got it.
That's good, Nicola. For the first time, I'll cheer for the Montreal Canadiens. Yes, you've inspired me.
Yes,
welcome
indeed.
aboard, Michael. Welcome aboard.
It's created some serious divisions on the side, so you can see who's who and which camp. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. I think we're going to take some audience questions now. And I'm just looking at the chat box. Q&A. Okay, so we've got a couple of new questions. I'm going to read them and I'll open up to see who would like to share or who would like to respond. For a company just starting down the path of ESG, do you have suggestions on how to start this conversation with the board of directors? Who would like to handle that one?
Maybe I can start. And I don't know what the attitude of your board of directors are. Probably not a hypothetical question, but I've been part of a lot of groups over the past, even global gatherings over the past couple of years, also virtually, where more and more people are coming together from all different parts of all different parts of society, around businesses and government and all of that. And the thing that seems to bind us all together, because everyone brings their own part of expertise and so on, is, when you talk about what we have in common and what we can do together, so if there's doubt about how important this is, then I think maybe that's a place to start. I would be really interested to, to understand how they look at it themselves. And then you can start to build something. And, at least our drive is rooted in that sense that we need to make a difference. And then everything flows from that. But I mean, it sits with us as people.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Michael.
and if I can build on that, I would say, I think we've gone from ESG being a nice to have to a must have. Like, this is a business imperative, and I think that's where the conversation starts with a board of directors. And companies will be measured by their employees, by their stakeholders, by their customers, as to what they're doing, and people will want to do business with other companies that are like-minded in this space. So very important to start the dialogue.
I have a list here that doesn't inspire me at all, but it's at least maybe something to go from. It increases cost efficiency. It leads to regulatory certainty and avoids future costs. It creates potential new revenue streams, opportunity to lower costs for customers, increases accessibility, and increases customer trust. And that doesn't get my heart beating, but it's all true. So I think you can, as you say, Nicole, you can come at it from different angles, but there's a sense here of the clock's ticking.
And maybe a last question to Irene. Like, do you think that we've over pivoted on ESG, where it kind of feels like it's capital E and a small s and a small g, and when we talk about ESG, and I think it's so important that we don't forget the other two letters in that 3-letter acronym.
Agreed. Sorry, is there a question?
Well, do you think we've over pivoted that on ESG, that it's a little bit too much around the environment, and that we're forgetting the social and governance aspects somewhat, like which are so important as part of the total ESG equation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think maybe for the purpose of this discussion, you're talking from your viewpoints, but it doesn't mean that it's the entire viewpoint. What I can tell you, at Iraq, we do put a lot of stock in the social side of things, whether it means that we make investments in Red Cross to help communities that are affected by COVID. We did a lot of contributions to small businesses to ensure that they stay afloat, right? Because they are really at the backbone of our economy. And so we've done quite a lot of contributions in that space. So definitely don't think the sustainability is dominating. But yeah, from a social perspective, we're really doing our part as well.
Yeah.
All right. Let me share another question if I could. We'll pivot, and there are so many interesting questions here. So here's one. My company has moved fully remote during the pandemic. I like the benefits, and so do our employees, but I'm concerned about maintaining and enhancing company culture. Any advice on how to tackle this?
Yeah,
and this
maybe
is
I can lead in.
Yeah.
Maybe I could lead in on. Oh, Irene, do you want to go first? Did I hear Irene? No.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Maybe
okay?
I'll lead in then. Okay, go ahead, Irene.
Okay, yeah. No, what I was going to say that, yeah, I mean, it's we've been affected by that as well. And for us, it's, just ensuring that you create, and you're very deliberate in creating opportunities to connect and talk about culture, what's working, what's not working. Dialogue is crucial. People like to be with people who are perceived to be like them, and that's striking a rapport, but you have to be deliberate about it. And so, we've employed that in all our management layers to ensure that they are meeting with their teams, ensure that there is harmony and avoid false harmony, which creates distrust or no trust. And so it becomes a barrier to cohesiveness and sort of continuing on your journey as your culture. So I'd say just ensuring that you're connecting with your staff.
Here's another really great question. In hindsight, what would you have done differently during the pandemic? I'm sure everybody's had moments of reflection. I know I certainly have.
Yeah, we had a really interesting one, because as we went into the pandemic, we looked at many scenarios, and we honestly believed that there would be quite a long downturn and a very gradual return to business. So we actually partially curtailed our supply chain. And that was a lesson learned, I can tell you, because the demand snapped back immediately, especially in our business when everybody's staying home. But I think in many businesses, I think that was our biggest lesson learned. And of course, none of us had done it before, but it's easier to turn something off than to turn it on.
Oh, there's wisdom in that. I think initially we all thought it was going to be a V recovery, right? Like a sharp hockey stick. We've moved to a K now, but it did come back ferociously. Nicola and Irene, anything now given the opportunity to reflect you might have done differently or your organizations might have done differently?
I'll let Irene go first.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm just kind of going through. I think the topic of mental health is one that, but that's a tough one because it became gradual. And again, because we've been in this for so long, we didn't anticipate to be in it this long. I'd say that's one that, people are grappling with. And I think if those resources may have been considered upfront, but it was hard to know when to apply them, right? Because like I said, it became a gradual thing that it was really weighing in on people. Long hours, not obligating people, and we never did, but people just felt obligated to work these extreme long hours. So I think maybe baking in some of our quiet hours earlier on and just, leading by example to say, no, we're going to have 8-hour days and that is it. And maybe reducing on some of the workload that we were already on our journey to. I think we could have stood to reduce that. But again, it was an eventual thing. So it's a tough question to ask, but I think I'd say going back to the people and the mental health probably.
Yeah,
Thank you.
From my perspective, other than I should have bought a proper office chair instead of sitting at a dining room table for 15 months. I should have bought all of the world's plexiglass supply. But seriously, I think that the way Michael expressed it, I think our clients at PwC that have done extremely well are the entrepreneurs who said, this is an opportunity, and they actually doubled down during the pandemic, and they secured supply, and then they were able to manufacture, and they were able to sell when everybody was out of stock. And I think a lot of businesses, similar to what Michael described, we're bracing for the worst and hoping for the best. And I think, with the benefit of hindsight, we at PwC, we might have been bracing for the worst, maybe a little bit more than we should have. Probably should have hired ahead of the curve and have more access to more talent during the year.
Well, thank you for the candor of all your questions. Here's a question that picks up on the theme of mental health that we've spoken about many times in the last hour, and it's very practical. So, I agree that employee mental health is a top priority. However, we have been negatively financially impacted over the past year. How do you balance these initiatives with cost? And I think, particularly for smaller organizations that have had some financial challenges, that's very, very practical. Any thoughts? Any advice?
Yeah,
maybe I'll take this one first. Okay. Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was saying, I understand where you're coming from. And some of the things we did where we just shifted. I can give you one example of it helped us is the timing, but maybe it's a good example. We used to have sickness days. So, up to 12 days a year where if you're sick, you could take paid time off. And we just switched those to wellness days. So what you could do with them, you still had the 12 days. It didn't cost us anymore, but you could do anything you wanted. You could take your dog for a walk, or take your kids to a doctor's appointment, or invest in your own learning, or just rest, And so we did a lot of these shifts based on the situation that, we're serving the needs, and we'll keep them as this one we had decided beforehand, but we learned a lot that doesn't cost us more, but it's a different way of thinking based on what the needs are.
Mindset. Shift in the culture, shift in the mindset. That's a great response. Okay. Similar question here. I think we have time for probably two more. Virtual opportunities have increased due to COVID. Do you see this as an opportunity to increase opportunities around flex time on the job. And you all have somewhat different businesses and business models. So your thoughts on, can we increase flex time, the model for working?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's inevitable, and it's I think most organizations are already thinking that way. We're not going to be going back, and Nicola touched on this in the opening segment. You know, I don't envision us going back complete 100% 5 days a week. Yeah, there's that magical number of 3. Yes, we've also heard that internally, but a pure flexible hybrid working environment, I think, is what employees want. And it just makes sense that we accommodate for that. And also kind of the shift in the talent landscape, just to get good talent, we're no longer having to look in, our own backyards. Now it's sort of expanded, which means that you also have to adapt to some of your flexible work experiences. So definitely, on that point, it's really about just adaptability to more hybrid and flexible environment for sure, even at Interact.
Yeah. Flexible work arrangements have been around for decades now, but this was a massive global experiment on whether they worked, and it is a resounding yes. So I think it is another one of these, it's a sea change, like many of these things are that have emerged during the pandemic. Okay, looking at the time, I'm going to throw the last question to Nicola. And it goes back to something you said in the video, Nicola. So the economic recovery, clearly it's happening for some, it's not happening for others, or at least not as quickly. And you mentioned that you thought there would be a deals-led recovery. Can you tell us a little bit more about your thinking on that?
Well, Susan, you mentioned a few minutes ago V-shape, and I think we went from V-shape to W to basically the entire alphabet soup as far as potential recoveries. I think where we landed at PwC was more around like a K-shape. So clearly some companies will be extremely strong coming out of this. For others, it will continue to be challenging. And I think, I truly believe in a deals-led recovery because there's so much capital out there and there's so many opportunities, and we're seeing it. The M&A market is extremely robust across all industries. We're seeing mega transactions, whether it's Rogers Shaw, whether it's CN and Kansas City Southern. So there's lots of mega deals, but there's also lots of deals going on in the mid-market space as entrepreneurs seek to grow their businesses through inorganic growth. So there's organic opportunities, but also inorganic opportunities. So that's why I come to the K-shaped recovery. Obviously there's going to be pent-up demand on travel, leisure. I think we all are looking forward to getting on a plane and going somewhere for vacation. So there's a lot of pent-up demand there, but it will be still very challenging, I think, for everything that is around travel, hospitality, all of those businesses that are related to leisure.
Thank you, Nicola. Well, thank you to all our panelists, to Irene, to Michael, and to Nicola for joining us today. And thank you to PwC for being great partners. I do want to take a moment and just summarize what I think I heard and I want to share what I'll take away from this. Clearly, many of the issues we spoke about today, climate change, digital transformation, mental health, have been on all our radar screens for a while. But it appears that the pandemic and what we've all been through in the last year has accelerated the pace enormously, and probably is, I believe, to quote Michael, it's a tipping point in many ways. There is no unringing the bell now. We are not going to put that proverbial genie back in the bottle. These are all issues that all of us as CEOs, as leaders, are going to address in very determined ways going forward. So again, really appreciate the wisdom of our panelists today and for raising these issues and sharing what their organizations are doing to succeed in the new world. So thank you to all of you for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session. Please do go read the survey report. It's really fascinating. Before we go, a survey will appear on your screen shortly. So if you're able, please take a few minutes to fill it out. We would really appreciate your feedback. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for your time today. Good luck in the future. And may we meet again in increasingly happy times. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
Thank you, Susan.